right now, the two sides of Parliament have united behind the Vigilantism and Related Offences Bill laid before the House yesterday. The NDC and MPP leaders on the Constitution, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee tasked to consider the bill have already highlighted its importance for Ghana's democracy. Both sides have agreed the bill should be considered under a certificate of urgency. My Joy Online editor Malik Dabu joins me to share details of the bill. Malik, we are excited because we started the campaign to ban party militias. We've seen the response of government, but now for many this is maybe a notch higher because we have a legal document that consolidates all that we've been discussing within the media and other spaces since the IRS was spoken on by-election violence. Just run us through the scope of this bill.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And if you check even what's happening in Parliament yesterday when the bill was laid by the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Mrs. Gloria Kufu, and it was laid under a certificate of urgency, there was a certain position precisely by the minority led by their leader Haruna Idrisu, who is member of Parliament for Tamale South, and his case was essentially that given the importance of this bill, he didn't think that it was proper to lay it under a certificate of urgency and to have Parliament reruled that and then the bill passed. But when the committee met, the Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee of Parliament, which sees this document, which is responsible for dealing with this document before it comes to the plenary, the House in whole, there was a unanimity of opinion by both the majority and minority at the committee level that they could take the bill under a certificate of urgency. So a ranking member on the minority, Haruna Inu Safusen, who is also a member of Parliament for Tamale Central and a lawyer, by the way, agreed that, look, this bill is important. So it's the reason why when the committee met, they issued a four-page report in which they all agreed that they can take it under a certificate of urgency. So Parliament is going on recess, but when Parliament is recalled on the 29th of this month, he's certain that the bill will be passed into law and the President can assent to it and then it becomes law. When that happens, the bill itself says that as soon as it comes into force as law, all vigilante groups stand disbanded. And it listed a number of vigilante groups: the Hawks, the Invincible Forces, the Delta Forces, the Bolga Bulldogs, the Asoka Boys, the Bamba Boys. These are the various groups that the bill itself lists, about 7 of them. And according to the bill, when it's passed into law, all these groups stand dissolved. But the bill is not only to deal with vigilante groups. The bill is also to deal with land guards. And the bill provides that persons who promote or create or sponsor or facilitate the creation or organization of land guards, persons who purport to protect the land rights of other persons or themselves, are acting in or will be acting in violation of this law when it comes into force. And such persons can go into prison for periods between 10 and 15 years. This is what the bill provides for. A
minimum of 5, maximum of 15.
Absolutely.
But we're told in the bill, Malik, that after the law comes into force, leaders of disbanded groups are given up to a month to send in writing a list of their members who were part of the group and sent to the Minister of Interior. We'll be coming to delve about that and also about the aspects of groups or organizations that this law or act does not apply to. But before we bring you that, private legal practitioner Martin Pebu, even though he agrees with aspects of the bill, believes punishment prescribed in it is harsh. He spoke to Kojo Jansen on the AM show.
Greater with the punishment, the proposed punishment, are really that hard, because for some of them, minimum of 10 years, okay, for that participation in such a group. So you are running from 10 to 25, you see, those are quite hard to be counting. I'm thinking that in this era of adding community services, okay, we are trying to pass a law to make sure that people can do community service as part of their sentencing when they are found guilty. We should incorporate some and give opportunity for parole. But to say the person should go to jail for 25 years, it's not exactly that made out. That's the first aspect of it. So it's good even the parliamentary committee has decided that there should be broader stakeholder consultation. Because you see, when you try to solve one problem, you have to be careful that you are not creating another.
Right.
Especially in the context of, trying to develop our country politically. We are still a young nation, so trying to get used to the tenets of democracy and the rest. So there are excesses are bound to happen. That one, no. Even the developed democracies, they still have excesses. I'm sure you remember the matter of Charlottesville. Was that last year or the year before in the U.S., where the KKK supporters clashed with some demonstrators. So what I'm saying is that yes, we need to punish crime, but we also have to be careful that we don't create a totally different problem altogether with such very stiff punishment. Right. That's the first one. But the most exciting thing about the bill for me is the attempt to trace the money, or as we say, follow the money. That is the part that seeks to criminalize funding of such parties. Right. You see, we all know that these fund such groups. We all know that these groups principally exist because they have funded. There are people who fund them. So these funders who are usually very powerful people. You see, so it's easy for them to hide behind their political party. But now that the law makes it clear that if you fund such a group, that funder himself will be in trouble, it's easier. So it will throw the searchlight on the people who fund this guy.
So you had lawyer Martin Pigbu there sharing his thoughts on the punishment as written in that act. And Malik,
and if I can comment on that, the reason why the bill is drafted in the manner it is drafted and the penalties provided for it is that there is a recognition that under the previous Criminal and Other Offences Act, Act 29, 1960, under that law, many of the activities that fall under this bill, i.e. political party, not specifically named as political party vigilantism, but the acts of violence that we see in polling stations and voting areas and all of that, those acts are treated as misdemeanors under that act. And by misdemeanors, you can impose fines. It is the reason why when members of the Delta forces acted in the manner that they did in Kumasi, when they were arrested and prosecuted, they got away with fines. And this is what the law provides for because they are misdemeanors. What this law is doing is to raise them above the level of these misdemeanors and make them serious offenses. And serious offenses attract serious sentences. The reason why the sentences imposed on one is found guilty of committing any of the offenses listed in this act, the minimum sentence you get is 5 years. And the maximum can be as high as 25 years because they are no longer misdemeanors. And this is for a reason. The president and the government, the general public, the various political parties, civil society organizations, the media, everyone recognizes the danger that this menace poses to the country's democracy and the peace and quiet that everyone enjoys. So one can understand and appreciate why when provisions are being made, the sentences that are proposed for deliberations in Parliament will be as punitive as they appear in the bill.
And Malik, it's interesting to note that we are told that this act applies not only to groupings, as we have always seen them, vigilantes or militias, but it could also apply to an individual who perpetrates acts of vigilantism or who serves as a land guard or who renders the service of vigilantism to any political organization or whatnot.
Clause 4 of the bill actually prohibits abetting and aiding persons who act as vigilantes. In fact, when you see any person acting as a vigilante or engage in vigilante activities as defined by this act, you have an obligation to inform the authorities, inform the security agencies that you have seen this happening so that action can be taken. So that's how wide the scope of the bill is.
Indeed, but we are told that this does not apply to certain groups of people, and I think that is good that it's clearly spelled out in the law that if you are a person who lives within a certain community, Malik, or neighborhood, and you act in concert with the aim of preventing an offense, you're not considered under this act, or this act does not apply to you.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that it's spelled out clearly that way, and that a person who's also witnessed the commission of an offense acting within the sole aim of preventing that offense happening, this act doesn't apply to you. So that, you know, we have citizen arrest and we have things like that. So people, we can differentiate between what vigilantism really is and when people mobilize to stop a possible crime or a threat of it.
One of the notable exemptions is found in Article 3.4 of the 1992 Constitution, which enjoins all citizens to, if anyone seeks to engage in a coup and suspend the Constitution, everyone has a responsibility, it's a duty imposed on all citizens to prevent that from happening. So that's one more exemptions. But the exemptions that you related to, the reason why these exemptions are created is that you do not want to paralyze communities, so that there are communities where persons can come together to lawfully prevent the commission of crimes. There is a recognition that the police can't be everywhere, and in those instances, persons are at liberty to come together to prevent others from committing crimes. If you do not make those exemptions in this law, now you paralyze the entire society, and people do not want to be seen to offend the law. Wrong things are happening and people will watch. And yet all of us have a constitutional obligation to play roles in whatever communities that we live in to prevent the commission of crimes and to help the police in enhancing peace and quiet and stability for all citizens. You can see clearly why the bill makes these exemptions and says that it does not apply to these groups.
Malik, I'll be coming back to take your closing comments, especially on what we do with the meeting or the talks that are happening currently between the NDC and the MPP while this process goes on in Parliament. Let's head to Parliament now and hear from the minority side on this bill.
Of the bill and the matters that it is seeking to regulate, in my view, requires broader consultation. In my view.
And for you, what will be the consequence if it's really pushed through under certificate of urgency?
It might be ineffective in dealing with vigilantism. We need the Peace Council. We need IDEC, which has been speaking on this matter. We need the police.
To really deal with this, we need to work together to understand what it is, and then to be able to pass a legislation. And if you are pushing us to do this within a day, 24 hours, in fact, it's not 24 hours, because we're going to sit here for the next, let's say, 5-6 hours. And so within 5-6 hours, we must pass this. That is not right. We are dealing with an issue about freedom of speech. We are dealing with an issue of freedom of assembly. And we are dealing with the right of political parties to exist and to function.
Recommendations of the eminent commission would have enriched this law. Who knows that some very significant recommendations have been made based on all the work they did, the experts they spoke to, and all of that. That will inform this legislation for it to be a good law. You can have, it's not just about rushing to pass a law.
I have there some minority MPs sharing their thoughts on this bill that's been laid before the House. And I've got my Joy Online editor, Malik Dabu, here with me. Malik, in wrapping up, it's interesting, we are told the general consensus from both sides of the House is that this bill is good. But interestingly, at the same time, both sides of the House are represented in an external conversation. And when I say that, I mean the parties they belong to. We have the NDC and the NPP in external in talks mediated by the National Peace Council on disbanding these groups. Some say duplication of efforts. At this point, what we are seeing with regards to the law is that it's under a certificate of urgency. We are likely to see it passed pretty soon, like you mentioned, on the 29th of April or a little after that. So what's the point in having these talks? With the
greatest of respect, I disagree with those opinions, and my disagreement is premised on this. The two issues are not mutually exclusive. That the fact that a law is being created does not preclude the political parties from their responsibility of ensuring that we do not even get to a point where the law has to be activated and people have to be arrested and prosecuted and dealt with. I think the essence of every society is to minimize the tendency for persons to be arrested and their rights deprived of them and all of that. Now, if somebody goes to commit an offense under this law, by the time that the person is arrested and prosecuted and sentenced under the provisions of this law, victims would have suffered untold pain and hardship. Therefore, it serves a useful purpose that the political parties will meet, will have a conversation, will voluntarily disband, that no harm comes to anyone for you to now resort to the application of the law and punishment thereof. So it is not an entirely useless process, and I do not think that the promotion of this bill vitiates or derogates from the importance of those meetings and the discussions thereof and the benefits that will fall out of that.
Thank you very much. Malik Dabu is my Joy Online editor. We will be following the two separate events, the talks between the NDC and the NPP mediated by the National Peace Council on disbanding party militias, and this vigilantism bill that has been placed before the House. And in there we are told that 1 month after its passage, leaders of various groups would have to write to the Attorney General and give a list of people who belong to the association, and the minister must, within 3 months of that activity, publish those lists in a gazette. We'll bring you more on this.